Hi everyone, it's me, Spring, the fiber enthusiast, and welcome to the channel. So we're going to start the new year off with a bang, and we're going to start on an Afghan. It's still the cooler months here in the States, so it's nice, but this one you could do in a very, very lacy form, and you could do it as whatever you wanted. You could make a wrap out of it. You could make a throw. You could make what I did, a baby Afghan. And I did it in a worsted weight, which made it much thicker, much more full. This is a very, very, very fine weight yarn, and it gives it a very lacy look. And I used a 3.5 crochet hook to do this. Again, it's up to you, and the amount of yardage you want to use to make whatever is going to be up to you. Now, I will tell you that I used close to 1,000 yards for the baby in the worsted weight. I really put a lot into it and made it a little bit larger than your standard baby size. But again, it'll be up to you as to how much you use. Now, the center here can be changed. I downsized this so that way I could fit it in screen here. The center of your Afghan or wrap or whatever can be a different color. Now, you're going to want to grab some stitch markers, preferably somewhere around the neighborhood of 3 to 4, just to kind of guide you between the sections as you go. Because this is worked in one fell swoop, it is not an edging around a center. So you're going to need your stitch markers for each side of the center. And you can make this a different color, which is what I did with the baby Afghan. Is the center of it was a multicolor and the outside was a solid color. And I'll explain to you as I'm going where you change your yarn. I will be doing this all in one. I won't be changing colors. I will be doing it in a self-striping worsted weight, just so that way you can see it as it's being worked a little bit better than working in this lighter lace weight. But this gives you an overview of what it looks like. Now, it is not complicated. However, if you like treble crochets, cross stitches, popcorn stitches, double crochets, single crochets, if you like stuff like that, this project's for you. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. You're going to grab whatever yarn you want to use. Now, I would recommend most definitely somewhere between a DK and a worsted weight. I don't think I would want it any heavier than that, because it would take away from the design. I would feel like it would. If you wanted to do a wrap, you could go down to like a fingering or sock weight type weight, baby weight, something like that, if you wanted it to be, lacy like this here. But if you want it to be a little bit more thick and a little bit more full, definitely go with your worsted weight, minimum DK, a heavy DK. So grab that corresponding hook. You're going to want to make sure your hook, if you're a tight crocheter, you want your hook to be a little bit bigger, because you want to be able to have that little bit of airiness and be able to work into stitches. So grab your yarn, whatever you choose, and the hook to match, or to match the stitch you're looking for. If you're a very loose crocheter, go down a hook size just to kind of level things out on the playing field here. For me, I will be using Burnett Pop. It's the older version. I have some just kind of hanging out, laying around. And in fact, I have it here. I will be using it. And I will be using either a 5.5 or a 6mm crochet hook. One or the other. I believe a 6mm is what I'll be using. So that's what I'm going to be using during the tutorial. Now, if you are new to the channel, I do have a couple of tutorials that are out that are stitch tutorials. And this is the Empress stitch, this right here. And you can go check that out if you would like. I will place a card in the upper right-hand corner. And the center here is the Noughts and Crosses tutorial. You can also go and check that out, and I will put a card up in the upper right-hand corner to that tutorial. All right, let's go ahead and get our stuff together and get started on this tutorial. Okay, so to get started, you're going to get your yarn, your hook of choice that goes with your yarn, some stitch markers, a needle to sew in your ends when you're done, and a pair of scissors, of course, that will be used when you're done. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is chain in multiples of 18. Now, I will show you how to gauge for your how many repeats you want. So each section here, which is half of this section of 3 V-stitches here, all the way across is 18 stitches. So I have 3 repeats right here for this swatch. So this is 18, 18, and 18. Now we do 1 full row of your little flowers here. And then we switch it up and we start working a different pattern in the center, and the beginning and end 18 stitches is the flower part, and that will get worked all the way up the side until it's just about the height that you want. And you can measure what your first, section looks like. Measure it out, see how much it is, and then you'll just add that to the top, and that'll give you, where you would stand for your finished product as you go along. If you think, I'm getting pretty close, I think I better, start changing over to finish it off with a full top row of flowers. That'll give you the idea to measure that bottom section as to how much taller it will be. But we're going to start here down at the bottom, and we're going to work this first flower section. All right, so I'm going to crochet in multiples of 18 plus 4. Now that will give me 3 repeats. This is just for your sample swatch. Once you've done your multiples of 18 to the length that you want, the width, because you're going to be working the width to the height, you're going to check and see, how much you want as far as the width. So just kind of gauge by looking at your chain as to how wide it is, if that is, wide enough for you, or you need to add 18 more, or you might want it to be a little bit less. As you go along chaining, just kind of get an idea as to how wide you want it to be. That's going to be up to you. But multiples of 18 plus 4. So I'm going to go ahead and work 3 multiples plus 4, and I'll be back. Okay, so once you have this chain in multiples of 18 to your desired length, or width rather, however wide you want it to be, you will add 4 chains. Now we're going to place a double crochet in the 4th chain from your hook. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, where my little stitch marker is here. Now, if you're working on a project, not just a swatch sample, I would recommend working into those back bumps of your chain. For my sample, I'm just going to be working into the front of the chain. So here we go. We're going to place a double crochet in that 4th chain from your hook. Now you're going to skip 2. So you're skipping the next 2, 1 and 2. And into the following, you're going to place a V-stitch. So a double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet all into that same stitch. Now you're going to repeat that all the way to the last 3 stitches of your chain. When we get to the last 3 stitches, I will meet back up with you. So once again, skip 2 and V-stitch in the next. So double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet all into that stitch. I'll meet up with you when we have 3 stitches remaining. Okay, so once you've made it to the last 3 chains of the row, you're just going to place 2 double crochets into that very last chain. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to chain 3 and turn our work. So chain 1, 2, and 3 and turn your work. And we're going to begin row 2. Row 2, you're going to start with a double crochet right back into that very same stitch, the first stitch. So you have 2 double crochets coming from that 1 stitch. Now we're going to work a V into the chain 1 space, a V into a V. So this will stay the same all the way up to the very top of your pattern, your Afghan. A V into a V. Now we're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to skip a V-stitch and single crochet to the chain 1 space of your next V-stitch. So skip 1 and single crochet to the next. Then chain 5 again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip a V-stitch, and we're going to place a V into each of the next 3 V-stitches. So 1 V-stitch into each of the next 3 V-stitches into the chain 1 space. So double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet all into that same chain 1 space. Then you're just going to keep working that same repeat. Now we're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, skip 1, single crochet to the next, chain 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You're going to skip 1 and place a V-stitch into each of the next 3 V-stitches. Here we go. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet is your V-stitch. One more V-stitch. Now you're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You're going to skip the next V-stitch, single crochet to the following V-stitch, chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, skip the next V-stitch, and place a V into the next V-stitch. We're coming up to the end of the row. And now we're going to skip to our turning chain, which is our very first double crochet of the row. At the top chain, the third chain, you're going to place 2 double crochets into that stitch. And that will end row 2. Now chain 1, 2, 3, turn your work. Place a double crochet back into that same stitch you just chained from. Jump over to your next V stitch and place a V into the V stitch. So into the chain 1 space. Now you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Single crochet to the chain 5. Your very first chain 5. Chain 1, 2, 3. Hop over to your next chain 5 and single crochet around the chain 5. Now chain 1, 2, 3, and place a V stitch into each of the next 3 V stitches. Now you're going to repeat that to the last V stitch of the row, at which point you place 1 V stitch into the chain 1 space of that last V stitch, and then you place 2 double crochets into the top of your turning chain to end row 3. I'm going to meet up with you down here at the very end. Okay, let's begin row 4. For row 4, you're going to chain 1, 2, 3, and we're going to turn our work around. And you're going to double crochet back into that same stitch. You're going to place a V into your next V stitch. Chain 1, double crochet back into that same stitch. Okay, now we're going to skip over our first chain 3 and we're going to work the popcorn section of the stitch. And I'm going to bring over another sample here so you can see what I'm talking about. So what we have here is 3 popcorns, and in between them there is a chain 3. Now these popcorns sometimes are made on the front and sometimes made from the wrong side of the work. So let's go ahead and begin. The first set will be on the right side of your work, and most likely your second set will be on the wrong side. We'll talk about that when we get there. So we're going to skip over the top of our first chain 3 and we're going to place 5 double crochets into the second chain 3 space. So 5 double crochets. It's 4 and this is 5. Now we're going to draw up a loop here and remove your hook. You might want to pinch that loop between your thumb and your index finger just to make sure you don't lose it. And then we're going to count back a total of 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What that is it brings you back to the very first double crochet you made of that group. You're going to insert your hook from the front. So if we're working the front side of the work, you're going to insert your hook from the front of that stitch all the way through to the back. Replace the loop back on your hook and pull it through. Now I pushed that popcorn forward with my middle finger, and now you're going to scoot those over because we're going to chain 3 and do it again. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to do that one more time here. 5 double crochets. Once again, you'll count back to your first double crochet, insert your hook from front to back, replace the loop, pull it through. Okay. Chain 3 and do one more popcorn into that same chain 3 space. So I'm going to scoot that over, 5 double crochets. One, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, create the popcorn, and now you can shift those popcorns more evenly spaced onto that chain 3 space. Now chain 1, skip your next chain 3, and then you will begin your repeats. You're going to place 1 V-stitch in each of the next 3 V-stitches. Then you'll skip over to that center chain 3 and do 3 popcorns, just like we just did. And you'll continue to repeat that to the last V of the row. When you get to this last V, I will meet back up with you. All right, so now we're down here at the last V in a V-stitch, and we are going to complete row 4 by placing 2 double crochets into the top chain of your turning chain. 2 double crochets into that stitch. Now we're going to chain 1, 2, 3 and turn our work over for row 5. Place a double crochet back into that same stitch. Place a V-stitch into the chain 1 space of the V-stitch prior row. Stacking your V-stitches. Okay, now you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and you're going to single crochet to the chain 3 space between the first popcorn and the second popcorn. Single crochet, chain 1, 2, 3, and single crochet to the next chain 3 space between the second and third popcorn. Chain 1, 2, 3, and now you're going to place 1 V-stitch in each of the next 3 V-stitch chain 1 spaces. So V-stitch into each of the next 3 V-stitches. And then you're going to repeat what we just did to the end of the row, to the last V-stitch. That's where I'll meet back up with you. Okay, after that last V-stitch there, you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and single crochet to the chain 3 space and repeat. Chain 1, 2, 3, single crochet to the next chain 3 space and chain 1, 2, and 3, and then jump over, placing V-stitches in V-stitches. I'll meet up with you at the very last V-stitch of row 5. Okay, so we're going to end row 5 the same as we always do. We're going to place 2 double crochets in the top chain of our turning chain. So 2 double crochets in that very last stitch to end row 5. Now we're going to chain 1, 2, 3 and turn our work over and begin row 6. Row 6 is the final row for our base part of our Afghan. After this, the pattern will change, and you will carry that part of the pattern on until it is to the desired height that you want. So let's go ahead and work row 6 together. Row 6 is really very straightforward. It is basically the same as row 1. We're going to place a double crochet into that very first stitch. We're going to place a V-stitch into the next V-stitch. So stacking your V's on top of V's. The only difference between row 1 as far as placement of V-stitches is we're going to be placing V-stitches around these chain 3 spaces. So 1 V-stitch in each of the 3 chain 3 spaces. Skip to your next one. And that's how we're going to work all the way to the end of row 6. Place a V into a V and 1 V into every chain 3 space. Just like that. I'll meet up with you at the end of the row where we place 2 double crochets into the top of your turning chain. Okay, so now we're going to start setting up for our next section. So here we have, if you look from the right of your project, on the front side of your work to the left of your project, we have our 2 double crochets together. We have our row of V-stitches. Then we have where the flower is, and now it has 3 V-stitches across the top of there. So count over the next 3 V-stitches, 1, 2, 3. That brings us to the center section between those flowers where the popcorn stitches are, and that is 3 V-stitches as well. Okay, so technically speaking, the end of the first repeat is right in the center of the middle V-stitch. So that's where we're going to place our first stitch marker, is in the chain 1 space of that center V of the first group of V's. Now you're going to skip over to the last 18 stitches. And again, we're going to place a stitch marker in the chain 1 space of the center V-stitch there. Now, between your 2 stitch markers is where the pattern changes. Everything on the outside of those is the same. So again, I'll bring over the smaller swatch I have here, the lighter weight swatch. Okay, so we're to this point right here where things change. All of the popcorn and first 18 stitches stay the same, and all of the last 18 stitches, popcorns and all of that stay the same. Right here is where it's changing. Just to kind of give you an overview here. So starting row 7, which begins the change that will happen and you continue until you get the height that you want. All right, so now we're going to chain 1, 2, 3, and we're going to continue the original pattern. Double crochet back into that first stitch, a V-stitch into a V-stitch, chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, skip the next V-stitch and single crochet into the following. Chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip the next V-stitch and place a V-stitch into the following V-stitch. Now it should be the V-stitch before your stitch marker. Okay. Now we're going to replicate that 2 double crochet to end the very first part. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to work into the right leg of that V-stitch where your stitch marker is. So the first double crochet of that V-stitch, place 2 double crochets into that stitch. Now move your stitch marker up at this point to this stitch that you just finished, the second double crochet. That will indicate to you every time that that's where your second or where your 2 double crochets go, because you want it to be just like what you start the row with to end that repeat. Now we're going to begin the new repeat to the next stitch marker. You're going to place a double crochet into the chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into the next stitch. In my case, it is a chain 1 space, so I'm just going to double crochet into the chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next. We're going to continue this repeat all the way down. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next. Now we're going to begin or finish this row with a chain 1. You should have in multiples of 2. So you should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. For my swatch sample here, again, it will be in multiples of 2. Now you do plus 1. So when you get to the next stitch marker, we're going to finish the row just like we began the row. You're going to place a double crochet into the chain 1 space to begin the last 18 stitch repeat. Going to move your stitch marker for the moment, and we're going to place 2 double crochets into the left leg of that center V-stitch where your stitch marker was. So 2 double crochets into that actual double crochet stitch. On the first one, that's where you replace the stitch marker. And that's where you'll place 2 double crochets on the next row. Okay, so there we have 2 double crochets into that stitch. Now we're going to place a V-stitch into the next V-stitch. Chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip the next V-stitch and single crochet to the following. Chain 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Skip the next V-stitch and place a V-stitch into your last V-stitch of your row. And then place 2 double crochets into the top chain of your turning chain to complete the row. Chain 3 and turn your work. All right, we're going to begin the row the same as we have been doing. Double crochet back into that first stitch. A V-stitch into your next V-stitch. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Single crochet around the first chain 5 space. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Single crochet around the next chain 5 space. Chain 1, 2, 3. Place a V-stitch into your next V-stitch. Now we're going to skip over to where our stitch marker is. So you have the last 2 double crochets of the row. You're going to go to the second one and place 2 double crochets into that stitch, moving your stitch marker up to the second double crochet in that stitch. Every time I recommend moving that stitch marker up, and you place it into that second double crochet. All right, now we are going to begin row 2 of the repeat for your center. And this is where you change your color, is for the center part. If you want the center different, you would change it after your 2 double crochets on the very first row where we did a chain 1 double crochet. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. All right, so now we're going to treble crochet crisscross stitch. You're going to yarn over twice, go to the second chain 1 space, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2, and yarn over, go through the last 2. Now we're going to treble crochet around the first chain 1 space, the one we skipped. Yarn over twice, swing your hook back to that first one, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2, and yarn over, go through the last 2. So you have created your first crisscross treble crochet. Now we advance only by 1 chain 1 space at a time. So we're going to yarn over twice and treble crochet into the next available chain 1 space. Treble crochet. Now we're going to treble crochet back to the stitch before, the chain 1 space before. So we're going to swing back and catch that one before. Once again, we're going to continue on 1 square, 1 chain 1 space at a time until we reach the end of our center section of the Afghan. So you just repeat this. All right, I'm down here at my last chain 1 space. I'm gonna finish that crisscross stitch. Just like that. Okay, so now we're going to skip that last double crochet right there and place 2 double crochets into the stitch where your stitch marker is. Let's go ahead and move that stitch marker. You're going to place that stitch marker back in the very first stitch. And 1 more double crochet into that stitch. And now we're going to repeat what we did on the first 18. V-stitch into the V-stitch. Chain 1, double crochet. And now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Single crochet around the chain 5. Chain 1, 2, 3. Single crochet around the chain 5. Chain 1, 2, 3. Place a V-stitch into your last V-stitch. And 2 double crochets into the top chain of your turning chain, the very last stitch of the row. Chain 3 and turn your work. Place a double crochet back into the same stitch. Place a V-stitch into your next V-stitch. And now we're to the popcorn from the wrong side of your work. It's the same thing, it's just the direction that you place your hook when you create your popcorn. So as you see here, those popcorns are on the opposite side. So the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to skip your next chain 3 and place 5 double crochets into the second chain 3. So 5 double crochets. Okay, this is the only change in these popcorns from the previous row where we worked them on the front side of the work. So instead of going from the front to the back, we need to come from the back to the front. Replace that loop back on your hook and pull it through. Then chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and repeat until you have your 3 popcorns. Now that you have completed your 3 popcorns, you're going to place a V into your next V. And 2 double crochets into the stitch where your stitch marker is. So you skip the first double crochet and place 2 into the stitch where your stitch marker is. 1 and 2. On the second one is where you place your stitch marker. Okay, now it's going to seem a little awkward at first, but the height difference between your single crochets and your double crochets and your treble crochets works out. This is going to level itself out by doing the treble crochets like we just did and the single crochets now. you're going to reach down and place a single crochet into each of the stitches between your stitch markers. So every single stitch between your stitch markers gets a single crochet. Now you should have an odd number of stitches. You should have multiples of 2 plus 1 in between your stitch markers on the single crochet row. If you don't, you need to make sure that you add 1 single crochet somewhere or rip back to the row before, and make sure that your stitches are in multiples of 2 plus 1. And I have my odd number of stitches. Now I'm going to place 2 double crochets into the stitch where the stitch marker is, replacing the stitch marker on the first double crochet. You're also going to want to make sure that each of your rows are consistently keeping the same number of stitches in the center. You don't want to, with the crisscrosses, you can accidentally start shrinking or increasing that section. So you want to make sure that you jot down how many stitches you have between those stitch markers for each of your repeating rows. So for your double crochets, chain 1s, for your crisscrosses, and your single crochets. All right, back to double crochet. Let's see, a V-stitch into your next V-stitch. And then we're going to reach over and do our popcorn stitches just like we did to begin the row. And we'll finish this row with a V-stitch and a V-stitch and 2 double crochets into the top of your turning chain, the last stitch of the row. I'll meet back up with you after I've finished my popcorn stitches. Okay, once you've finished your popcorns and you've made it to the end of the row, we're going to start back with a chain 3, turn your work, double crochet back into that first stitch, place a V-stitch into the next V-stitch, chain 1, 2, 3, and single crochet to the first chain 3 space between the popcorns, chain 1, 2, 3, and single crochet to the next chain 3 space between the popcorns, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, V-stitch into your next V-stitch, and now we're going to jump over and place 2 double crochets into where your stitch marker is, into that stitch. Remove your stitch marker, and 1 and 2, and place your stitch marker back into that second stitch. Okay, so now we're going to begin the center part of your Afghan repeats. You did the fillet row, you did a crisscross row, and then you did a single crochet row. The amount of single crochets you had should equal the amount of stitches you had for your fillet row. So we had a double crochet, a chain 1, and we worked that all the way down here, ending with 1 final double crochet. How many ever stitches you had should be multiples of 2 plus 1. The same thing with your single crochets. You should have a total of multiples of 2 plus 1 and the same as your beginning fillet stitches. If you have to add in an extra stitch here or there to create the same amount, you may do so. It will help in the long run, because you may end up losing a stitch somewhere in your crisscrosses. So if you accidentally lose a stitch, it's okay. Just add a stitch in on your single crochet row, but make sure to keep count of those stitches. Okay, so we're going to place a single crochet into our a double crochet into our very first single crochet. Now we're going to chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet into the next. We are going to continue this fillet pattern, the squares. You should have the same number of squares as you did on your very first fillet row, and you should be ending with one double crochet at the very end, creating stitches in multiples of 2 plus 1. So we're beginning that repeat for the center and finishing up the repeat on the outsides of your pattern. Okay, so for instance, my fillet count on the first row of the center part of the Afghan was 9 fillet squares. I should have 9 fillet squares at the top of this, or for the beginning of this repeat, and I do. Now I can move on to complete the rest of this row by placing 2 double crochets into the stitch where your stitch marker is. We're going to be moving that stitch marker up to that very first one of those 2. Now V-stitch into the V-stitch. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Single crochet to the first chain 3 space between the popcorns. Chain 1, 2, 3. Single crochet to the next chain 3 space. Chain 3 and place a V-stitch in the last V-stitch of your row. And 2 double crochets into the top of your turning chain, the very last stitch of your row. Chain 3 and turn your work. Double crochet back into that same stitch. Place a V-stitch into your next V-stitch. You're going to place a V-stitch into each of the next 3 chain 3 spaces. So V-stitch into each of those chain 3 spaces. This is completing the repeat for the outside of your Afghan. The beginning repeat and the end repeat. V-stitch into your next V-stitch. And 2 double crochets into the stitch where your stitch marker is. So you're skipping over that first double crochet and hitting the second one. Placing your stitch marker back into that second double crochet. All right, now we're going to begin row 2 of your repeating rows for the center, which you can just jump back and go to the treble crochet crisscross row. So treble crochet into the second chain 1 space, and then treble crochet into the first. Go back to that first one, and you're going to repeat that to the end. And when you get to the end, you're going to place a double crochet into the very last stitch of that row right here, continuing to keep up with the multiples of 2 plus 1. I'll meet up with you when we get to the next stitch marker. Okay, so once you've made it all the way across with your treble crochet crisscross stitches, you've placed 1 double crochet into that final stitch here. Now we're going to place 2 double crochets into the next stitch. And move the stitch marker up to the first of those 2 double crochets. And V-stitch into your next V-stitch. Place 1 V-stitch into each of the next 3 chain 3 spaces. One V-stitch into the last V-stitch of the row. And 2 double crochets into the top chain of your turning chain. Two double crochets, 1 and 2. Now you're just going to chain 3 and turn your work over and continue working. Once again, make sure that your stitch count in the center stays the same for each of those 3 row repeats that you have there. The outside edges are worked the same, continued all the way up. Now you're going to continue working this once again until you have reached the height that you desire, or close to the height that you desire. Again, you're going to measure how much this is at the beginning edge. So let me pull this over. And for instance, I would measure my beginning, and it's roughly 3.5 inches. So I would go until I'm about 3.5 inches from the height that I want. Then I will come back and I'm going to meet back up with you, and we will complete this row, the row with all the V-stitches on it together. So the last row of your repeat for your edging is where I will meet back up with you. And that way we can work together the top part that looks like this, but placement of your V-stitches can be a little tricky, and getting back on pattern to go all the way across the top of your project. So I'll meet back up with you. Okay, so now you have your Afghan to the height that you desire, or close to, with the exception of the last trim work, edging, the last few rows that completed off to match it up all the way around. All right, so the next thing to do is we're going to have to evenly space V-stitches. You should be on the row where you chain 3 and single crochet between your popcorn stitches, chain 3, single crochet between the popcorn stitches, and so on. Where you are in the center part will depend on where as far as the height of your particular project. It could be any of those 3 rows. So what you're going to have to do is find where your V-stitches are at the bottom down here of your work, right below your first row of fillets. And you're going to count how many V's you have. So what I go by is, if you remember at the beginning, we took and worked into the center V of those 3 that run down, separating those 2 square flowers. Okay, so here's my 3 V's, and I'm going to work my fingers up to where the fillet starts, which is right here. And then I'm going to go to the center one and count that as 1. And the same thing on the other side. You have 3 V-stitches. So the center one just below the row of fillets. That is your stitch, your V-stitch count that you need to create above. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for me. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to move my stitch marker from this double crochet to between the double crochets, because you remember we took and turned that V-stitch into just 2 double crochets. So that's 1. Now I'm going to go down here to the other side and do the same thing with the last stitch marker. I'm going to place it between those 2 double crochets. That's 2. Now I need to find the center, so that way my flowers line up. That's the next key part, is you want to make sure that your flowers line up top with the bottom. So I'll bring over, once again, the lighter weight. So you can see what I mean by your flowers lining up. So when you're placing your V-stitches to begin your last section here, you want to make sure that you're making those V-stitches in line with the flowers below. That way you're recreating those squares evenly placed. Bring this back over. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to find that center V right here, and I'm just going to work my way up to the top and place a stitch marker in that place. And I'm going to use a different one just so that way I know that's center. So that's 3. Now I need to place 2 V's in between these sets of stitch markers. So evenly spacing out, I'm going to place one here and one let's see here. Move that over 1. There we go. And just evenly space them between those stitch markers. So I got 2 more to place. I'm going to try to make them equivalent to the other side. And it's not exactly perfect because your ending row before you start the final could be on a fillet row. I don't recommend it. I would at least go through the crisscrosses or to the single crochets, but if you end on a fillet row, that's fine. You just need to evenly place your V's. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 V stitches. So then you begin your repeat back from where you started, from the very beginning. Now I will timestamp rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down below. Then I will put a break and timestamp the rows 1, 2, and 3 for your center part here. So what you're going to do is just go ahead and pick back up. Now I'm going to work to the center here with you. I know this video is quite extensively long, and if you need more help, by all means, I will be more than happy to help you. So here we are. We're going to chain 1, 2, 3, turn our work, double crochet back into that same stitch. Place a V-stitch into your V-stitch. One V-stitch into each of the next 3 chain spaces. V-stitch into your next V-stitch. Now V-stitch in between those 2 double crochets that you've been working together. So right in between, you're going to place a V-stitch. That's bringing that back to the original V-stitch. I'm going to remove my stitch marker at that time. Now we're going to place a V-stitch where our next stitch marker is. Again, you just want to do your best at evenly placing those new V-stitches across this section. Once again, V-stitch where my next stitch marker is. And now I'm to the center. I'm going to V-stitch into that. You just want to make sure that you have the same number of V-stitches to begin your final section of your Afghan as you had to begin with, your very beginning. And then, of course, you want to make sure that your center in each of those flowers, depending on how many flowers you have across the section, you want to make sure that they all will match up. Then you'll, of course, stretch everything out. It gets kind of wonky when you're working on it, but once you kind of stretch your stitches and get them straight, it'll straighten out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue working on this to complete this section. Okay, so just a quick, this is what the top of it looks like. Once again, you are completing what you have going on all other sides. And that was in the Burnette Pop. And this is in a very lightweight baby. So you can see there's a pretty dramatic size difference. Exact same everything, just 3.5 millimeter crochet hook with this, and a 6 millimeter crochet hook and worsted weight with that. And I hope that there was enough information in this video to help you complete this on your own. If not, that's perfectly okay. By all means, please comment down below. Reach out to me in a private email or in the Facebook group, and I will be more than happy to help work you through this pattern. It's more intermediate than it is beginner, but hopefully if you are a beginner and you give this a shot, you are able to work through it by my instructions. All right, everyone, be blessed, be a blessing, and until next time, bye for now.